afternoon. Welcome to NookChat.
Good afternoon.
We've got Les Sturgeon here today, one of the old timers. He's even older than I am, so that's really old around here.
Not
But
older than I am.
his family goes back to the early part of the last century, and they came when his dad was just a little boy. So you know that's a long time ago.
Came from where?
So, Les, would you begin and tell us what you,
Okay.
and I'll pull up the pictures as we go.
My grandparents came here from Missouri in about 1905, I believe it was, because my dad was born in 1907, him and his twin brother. It was Wilbert and Wilford Sturgeon. And it's in the parking lot, it wasn't a parking lot then, there was a house where the parking lot of the Christian Reformed Church is down here. And then they grew up here, and my dad got married in 1933, I believe it was, and work got a little short, so he moved to Oregon. And I was born in Coquille, Oregon, in April the 9th of 1934. And they had enough of Oregon, so they came back up here, and they moved into a little house on the road just goes north of Everson a ways, and $5 a month for that house.
Wow.
And so they got to looking around, and they rented a house in Strandell, and there was it's on the corner of Roder Street and not Roder, but Strandell Street and Everson Road. It's that little house that's still there. The fellow's remodeling or something. He's got a container out in the front now. But I have a picture of me and my little Speedo in one of the pictures over there. I was 1 year old, and but that was $5 a month then too. But then Dad bought the lot on the other corner down across from where the city garage is there, and they built the house, whatever he could get $1 worth of lumber. Well, he'd nail it up, and first thing you know, we had a 16 by 24 house, we called it. Most people would call it a shed. But, we moved into that, and then he kept at it, and we built on another 16 by 24. So that house there is 24 by 32. And we lived in that until my sister came along, and then we moved from there up to the Fazan property that Dad bought a part of. But the memories of Everson and Strandell, there used to be a lumber mill over there where the big warehouse is now, and Dad would send me after nails to go get it, you know, and he wanted 8-penny nails, and I didn't know what an 8-penny nail was from a beanpole, you know, and I thought it was made out of 8 pennies. And so they'd give me a bag of nails, and I'd bring it back to Dad. But it was a great time growing up. That road was all gravel then, and well, not really gravel, it was mostly mud. And I was talking to Spencer about it, and he said that he got stuck there one time. But I was 3 years old, and Dad would have to take me by the hand to jump the ruts, so I wouldn't fall in the crevices. So it was just a fun time growing up.
Let's go back to some of these earlier pictures. This was Les's dad and his twin brother when they were 2.
Yeah,
This would have been in 1909.
yeah.
So,
In front of that house down there where the parking lot is for the church now.
so over there,
Yeah,
Everson Christian Reform.
yeah.
Yeah. And this was about 10 years later. And this is Grandpa with the beard. Come from Missouri.
Yep.
Okay. And there's a picture you don't see often of the road bridge, the highway bridge. So, and as he pointed out, there's still loose lumber down here at the bottom that they threw off that they didn't use in the construction. They just threw it off the edge and left it lay there.
I think that was taken off of the water tower that was in Reikendiver's backyard there.
Yeah, this would be taken off the water tower,
And you can see the old railroad bridge on the other side too.
which you see is quite a bit lower. There's a, oops, I gotta do that for the camera. Oops.
Where's the camera?
Now you guys can look at it.
Oh.
And this was taken from the bridge. You don't see very many people, pictures taken from the bridge of early Everson. Yeah. Thank you. Now just set them down there and they won't be bad. This building right here is Kale's Canning. And this is the creamery up in the light colored building on the top picture. And on this bottom picture, the creamery is over here. And this picture is interesting to me because most people don't know what a donkey is. They think they know what a donkey is, but this is a donkey.
Oh, yeah.
And this is in your dad's,
I don't know for sure where it was.
but your dad,
No, this came from Tom Martin's pictures.
ah,
I inherited them.
oh, But this is what a donkey looks like. And when I came to Uncle Dave's place, he still had a donkey sitting on the back of the woods there where he had logged it the last time. And who was it I saw the other day has an operating, Norm Bellingham Moore. He has an operating donkey motor.
Wow.
So he has his dad's old donkey motor. This is a donkey. And there's very few pictures of this. This is the Presbyterian Church before it burned in '37. It was built in '14, and it was burned down in '37. This is the one my uncle took the windows out of. They're still inside the church now, but while this thing was burning, he was taking out the windows so the windows would at least be saved.
Oh my gosh.
And who are these people?
This is my dad and my uncle and my grandmother Ellen Sturgeon, and this is my Aunt Georgie. I don't know where the picture was taken, but I have very few pictures of her. I think my grandparents were kind of undecided where to move because they named her Georgie Arizona Sturgeon.
And this is a picture of the house that's across from the Everson shop.
Yeah, that's the one my dad built, 16 by 24 at a time.
And that's you on the porch.
Yeah, and my mother.
And this is another one of young Les in Cornwall Park. And this is at Rotor.
Yeah, that was my first grade.
We're going to hear about Rotor next month, aren't we? Yeah. Well, this is a picture taken at the Rotor School.
Her name was Miss Kink. I don't know what her full name was, but we called her Miss Kink. And she married Mr. Irving. He was a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher. And Mrs. Soloback taught the 6, 7, and 8. And she was a crippled lady, but she could pack a big stick.
They were allowed to have sticks then.
Well, she had a rubber hose hanging in there, and it pretty well let everybody know that they better behave.
You never saw her use the rubber hose, though?
No, never had to.
Oh, okay.
It was too scary.
Was she allowed to teach after they got married?
Yep. They changed the law as when they got married.
Ah, so that's good.
Yeah, good reason.
And here's another picture of Rotor.
Yeah, I think that's the second grade one.
None of the kids are smart.
So you have to look at these.
There's Grandma's dining room behind those windows.
Question here. I just want to ask you, because I just looked at it, but what actually literally does that donkey, those things do?
Oh, it runs cables out to pulleys out in the woods that drag logs up,
Oh.
all over. They had a whistle deal there, and the guy would blow the whistle,
Yes.
and then they would pull them in.
Yes.
What year?
Yeah. These in the 30s.
What year was,
Probably around 1940.
yeah, he was a Rotor from, what,
Yeah.
39 and 40?
I was born in 34, so I was 6 years from 34 is
Be 40.
40.
It'd be 40 and 41 then,
Okay.
for that, for pictures of Rotor. And this was, moving on, well, this is into Everson School, which was built in 14.
Was it?
The school was built in
Yeah, I
14,
didn't know when I
so
was born.
we moved up to 14.
They consolidated the schools and.
And that was the whole school, wasn't it?
No.
No, that was just
That
your
was
grade.
just my class,
That was just his grade.
Oh.
yeah.
So-
And, there's a story goes with that picture though. Richard Dieter, he's the one right here, and, I'm in there someplace. I can't even see it, but,
You said Richard Dieter?
what's that?
You say Richard who?
Yes,
Richard Dieter?
yes.
Well,
He used to,
passed.
he's passed away now,
Yeah.
but we went to school together there. But yeah, I'm right over here, third guy from him. And he had a 10 gauge shotgun, double barreled with the old hammers on the outside. And I wanted to buy it from him, $5. So I got the $5 and I said, I'll give it to you at school. He brought the gun, leaned up in the corner of the schoolroom, and gave him the $5 after school. I picked up that big 10 gauge double barrel and packed it home. I was thinking now, and that was a mile to where I lived from the school, so now the SWAT team would have been out.
Yeah.
Where was the Everson School then?
I couldn't hear you.
Where was the Everson?
It's where the park is now, over here.
Right where the gazebo is now.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And there's a tennis court behind the old school there.
It was torn down in 54 or 5.
Okay.
The tennis court is how come I have a flat spot on the back of my head. It was covered with ice one time, and they had coal burning furnaces there, so it'd take the clinkers out of there and they'd throw it out behind the deal between the school and the tennis court, and we would run on that and then slide on the ice as hard as we could. Well, I slid too hard and flattened out the back of my head.
And this is the whole student body at Everson.
That was
You notice that row of girls right there? They're all the same height. The row of all of those tall shoulders are just in a solid line across the
basement.
I mean,
Only had a
That's
basement.
the whole school.
And this is the old IOOF hall that burned down in 48.
Yeah,
So most people remember it as having a butcher shop in it.
yeah, that's when it
But
burned.
this one shows Bulmer's, and who was the other one?
I don't-
Furniture store.
That was a corner of Harkness.
Mr. Bulmer was a jeweler and watchmaker and stuff like that. And where the eye doctor shop is in Everson now, he had a jewelry store there. And there was a park bench sitting out in front of it, and people would come there and sit and talk and visit and carry on. And but I never seen that man when he didn't have on a suit and tie. All the time he was there, he was a real businessman that dressed like a businessman, and it was so fun to see.
He started at Nooksack. His family were old timers at Nooksack, and he started Nooksack, and then when Nooksack didn't get, they kept burning down, so they moved over to Everson.
Well, Anton Nyan, that was his first fire.
Yeah.
When he started the fire department, he was walking on the sidewalk.
Hmm?
Anton Nyan's That was his first fire when he joined the
Right.
fire department. He was walking down the sidewalk and discovered it was on fire. Ran back, and he said that it cracked the windows across the street on the High Notes building. It
Yeah.
was so hot.
And that was Anton Nyan's first fire?
First fire.
Wow.
That
Yeah,
was
he
it.
told us that when he was here in NookChat. He said that was in his initiation to Everson as the fire department, was the burning of the IOF hall.
Yeah, that, it had a, go ahead,
What grade were you in here?
I can't see the picture.
It's
so.
the whole school, whole group.
Oh,
You remember?
I was probably in the 4th, 5th grade, somewheres in there.
That'd be mid-40s.
No, I'm probably in here then too, then.
I think so.
By then, yeah.
Yeah. That's that good-looking guy you're looking at.
Obviously Spence went to school with Les.
When that,
After the 4th grade, my first 4 years were in a one-room grade school, Forest Grove.
yeah,
Then they changed, took Everson out of the Mount Baker School District, made a change, and put
Yeah.
us in the Nooksack District. Then I went to the Everson grade school.
that IOOF hall that burned had a butcher shop in it, and Frank Du Bois, the lawyer, had a corner of it with his law books and things in there. But the old walk-in lockers that they had, for an insulation, they used sawdust in the walls, you know, filled it up with sawdust, and when the sawdust got on fire, it burned for a long time.
The one thing I remember about that building is it's the only building in town with a safe.
Was it?
So the building, in the earlier days.
Yeah.
So the businessmen, before they built the bank building,
Yeah.
the businessmen all brought their money over there and put it in their safe in the butcher shop until morning, and then they'd come and get their money and go back to their businesses. Then they built the bank building, so that the safe
Yeah.
wasn't as important. And here's young Les, a little older, with his sister and mother and her dog.
Yeah. I
And
think my mother liked the dog better than she liked her kids.
but she doesn't have a dog there.
No,
This
the
is-
dog had passed away.
This is her just before she died, and this was she was 93 here. So, still looking and still smiling.
Yeah.
You weren't too bad hard on her. And who were these two pictures of?
Oh, that's my dad and his sister Sadie and my uncle Wilford. My dad and Wilford are twins. They don't look a thing alike. My dad was quite dark, and my dad and mom went to a funeral for an Indian fellow over at Linden at Gillies there, and Beatrice Klein and her husband Benny, they're Indian folks, and they came in and she asked Benny, "Who's that Indian that's sitting by Dorothy?" So,
Yeah. And
yeah, this is my dad and mother. I forget what year it was, but it was in 1954 it says. And their little dog Blackie.
here's the last one.
Yeah, this is the last one. He died on that trip. He was up in Birch Island, British Columbia at a rest area, and he had a heart attack, and that was it.
Is that a Nash?
Yes.
This is
Ran
those of
over.
you who don't remember a Nash car.
Yeah, I do.
This is a Nash car.
That was a Nash Rambler. They
Nash
called it.
Rambler.
Yeah.
A song about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we did have one.
Now let's go back to stories.
Okay. We lived in the house on the corner of Everson Road and Robinson Street. Didn't have street names then, but across the road, it was a county garage at the time. Now it's a city garage, and the house that's there, Marv said that they lived in that for a while. Well, the people that I first knew that lived in there, their name was Smithberg, and in those days, people played jokes on one another because they was all neighbors. And this lady had chickens, so Dad got a chicken egg and he boiled it, and he went over and put it in the nest. And this lady took it out and she came over and she said, Wilbert, she said, my chicken are laying boiled eggs. Dad said, maybe it's too hot in there for him. So he got an egg and he took and punched holes in it and blew the innards out, you know. And she came over, you know, a week or two later and she said, Wilbert, she said, my chickens are laying empty eggs now. So, those folks, they finally moved away. They moved to Alaska. And then a fellow named Bamford moved in. And he run the Boy Scouts program at the Presbyterian Church for quite a while. And he showed me how to braid whips and with leather and all that stuff. They were really, really good neighbors. And so that was about the extent of that area. But Nordstrom Lumber Company was across the road there where the warehouse is now. And they sawed lumber there and they planed lumber there. And it had a log pond down behind it. I was never allowed to go down there by myself. But when a guy named Fred Rohde lived down that road that goes past it and had a big farm down there. And his son and I would go down and catch frogs out of that log pond and off of the bridge. And so we had frog lakes quite often that way. But it was, I think I was born in the perfect timing for me to experience all the good things I did. It was just flat out fun.
Amen.
And my folks, if I got my chores done, when we lived there on that corner, all I had to do was keep the wood box full, and Mom could burn wood like it was going out of style. So I kept the wood box full and would get to go do anything. And then probably, I had to be home though at a certain time, and that taught me promptness, because I was in big trouble if I wasn't there on time. And the Dieter kids lived over in Everson there, where I think it's 3rd Street goes back down that way, and they had a house back there, and they got apartments there now where their house used to be. And I'd go ride my bicycle over there and visit with them till time to go home, and we played together and everything. And one time the river was up, and Dad says, now you don't go on no rafts or nothing on that river when it's up, because they had a slough went through there. And guess what I did?
No, you wouldn't.
They had 2 4x12 planks, probably 12 feet long, and when we would get on them, they took and put 2 strips of wood across to hold them together with shingle nails. And when we'd get on them, they would sink down and our feet would get wet. So they took an old dishpan, turned it upside down and nailed it to those 4x12s. And we would pull ourselves out into the current, and then we would pull ourselves back into the shallows again. And everybody had, just one person at a time would get a turn at it. Well, when it got my turn, the shingle nails came loose, and the 4x12s went apart like water skis, and I went down and got rather wet.
But what fun.
Oh, yeah.
And what did Mom say, Dad, about that?
I didn't ever tell them.
Oh,
And I went in and got dried off, and that was the end of that story. But,
she never noticed you were wet?
well, I got dried off before I even headed for home.
Oh.
I went in the Dieter's house and got dried off. But, oh, I tell you, the experiences. And when I was 12 years old, I got my first .22. And when I got my chores done, down to the river I'd go. And we could shoot a fish or a duck or whatever and bring it home and have supper. And so that was a grand experience. And one time we were down there, I was about 14 at that time, and Elvin Klein and Ted Miracle and I and Clarence Harriman were all down at the river, and we all had our rifles and everything, and we had been plinking. We'd set up something and plink at it, see who could shoot it the most often or something. And we were walking home, and a seagull flew by, and Ted Miracle, he said, "Hey, watch this," and he whoop, and shot like that, and he hit that seagull right in the head, and it dropped, you know, and he couldn't have done that again to save his life. But it was a neat deal. But,
Yeah.
and then another time, there was a bear got down at the river, and Clarence Harriman and I, we went bear hunting, and he had a 30-30, I think it was, or a 32 special or something, and I had a 22. So we went down there, and coming back, and it was after dark when we was coming back, but the in the old days, they cut the trees off about 10 feet up in the air or higher, and this old cedar stump there had burned out on the inside, so it looked like two legs there, and the moon was shining, and man, we seen a bear standing up, you know, and really got our blood pressure.
Did they kind of look like a human being?
When the moonlight was shining through the legs, it looked like a bear standing up. See, it was an old burned out stump. And it was,
Probably scared a few. is what
Oh.
they scared.
the stump didn't get scared.
Did you fill it full of lead?
No, we waited to see if it moved. We was trained that way though, you know, you don't shoot at something you don't know what it is.
No, right,
Yeah,
right.
and you always make sure there's nothing behind it in case you miss. So the idea was to never miss, but when you get a little nervous, you might move just a tad, you know. So, but
And the moon would move, and you know, it might look like the stump was moving too, you know.
oh, that was another thing as we was coming back from that little nerve-wracking deal. I think it's called phosphorus. It glows in the dark.
Yeah.
And here's this little spot of phosphorus there, you know, spooked us again. And we were walking through the buck brush, and it's those, we called it buck brush anyway. They're about 5 feet tall, and they got little white berries on them.
Snowberry.
Yeah, and so as we was going through there, he got by it, and then a limb was in there, and it hooked me. And oh boy, did my blood pressure come up. So that was some of my scariness experiences.
How old were you when you bought the shotgun?
I was about 10.
So you got shotgun before you got the 22?
Yeah, I never did shoot that. It was an old Damascus barrel, twist barrel, you know, and I was afraid to shoot it.
Yep,
And I just wanted it for decoration.
with hammers.
Yeah,
I had one of those.
yeah, and, but it was just grand.
I got my great uncle's 12 gauge double barrel,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw it knock my dad down
Oh, yeah,
and took him on his tail. He pulled both triggers,
yeah,
and I still have the gun.
Yeah.
I've never shot it.
yeah.
I wouldn't be able to, I don't think, because I remembered my dad.
Well, the new shells are more powerful than the old days
Oh, yeah.
was, because.
Were you born in the 1930s?
I was 34,
34?
yeah,
Okay.
and,
You remember all the trains coming by, the
Yep.
steam trains?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they came right across from, and during the war, the Canadians came on that train on the Milwaukee, going by our house and waving at us and stuff, you know. They go down to Fort Lewis for training, and so we got to see a lot of that. But
Did they have daily runs? Do you remember?
Oh,
they,
yeah,
they
every-
still had daily runs.
every
when you-
day, yeah.
So the gas,
Oh,
go ahead.
there used to be a railroad depot right here in Everson.
Right.
Jay Hale was a foreman on the section gang that kept it. He was our neighbor. And so he let me go in that shed and sit on the speeder and all of that stuff. So it was a fun deal.
That was the BB&BC Railroad.
Oh,
Bellingham Bay, British Columbia, before
That
they
was
changed the
original
name of
before
it.
yeah,
Milwaukee.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But there was a spur went off at the central area up there. It went right through Harriman's old place, you know,
Oh, yeah.
John Harriman. And Clarence and I was out fooling around in the field one day, and we found an old railroad tie that was still there from that old train.
Wow.
And my Uncle Millard, he run that train. He was an engineer on the train that went over to, that lake, over there on the Pole Road. So on the train went on the other side of it and hauled logs over there. So,
Oh, is that the track that crossed the Everson Goshen Road just south of the auction barn?
south, quite a bit south, about a
Quite a-
mile and a half.
Because there was one there that, the old Nordstrom sawmill had a,
Yeah.
a wide gauge railroad.
Yeah,
And
that-
they had the donkey right on the flat car.
That went out to the Mecklem farm.
Yeah, it went
Yeah.
out that way, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was another thing. The Mecklem, they owned lots of property, and he had cherry trees and gooseberries and all kinds of
Yep.
fruit to sell and everything. But what interested me was Mr. Mecklem. He had some eye problems, and he got regular glasses like I got, but they had little binoculars stuck on them. They were about that long, and he drove with those little binoculars. But you know, there wasn't cars like they got
No.
today.
Yeah.
And then I think Mrs. Mecklem was Gus Nordstrom's sister, because Colleen Nordstrom would go down to her aunt's and grandmother's place that was on the Mecklem property. And the Nordstroms had a dog, a Springer Spaniel, and it was well trained. And they always had prayer at their house, and they say, okay, it's prayer time. The dog would go over to a chair. Gus would say amen. And when they said amen, the dog would get down and go about his business. But I was going to tell you about Mr. Bamford that lived across the road from us. He would bring me Sunday school papers and stuff like that. I didn't go to Sunday school right then, but I started going to Sunday school, and I think God hooked me on Sunday school because I'm still love Sunday school, and God has done so much for me. I don't think I could have been born at a better time than what I was, because it just everything was perfect. And I found a woman. She was a girl at the time, but she liked me.
That's good news.
In fact, she even got to love me, sort of. At times, anyway. So, but it was just a grand time, and I think I was kind of nasty. When we first got married, I got saved when I was 18, and I got married when I was 19. And then when we got married, we was keeping house and everything, and so I would help her with the dishes. And one day she said, well, you do the dishes and I'll do them tomorrow. I thought, uh-oh, I'm setting the wrong example here. And so I said, no, you better do it. And you know, that still haunts me today, that I was a scum enough not to help her when I should have. I helped her, you know, when she was sick or something like that, but she did the dishes from then on. But now I get to do them all by myself. So I guess I'm being punished. Whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. I'm having a harvest.
Do you still remember the old gas car for passenger train unit that would travel by itself on the train track?
I only seen it once, but it was all by itself too. It wasn't pulling anything. That's the only experience.
A streetcar type person.
Yeah, it was a streetcar
Like a
like that.
streetcar.
Mhm. But that was,
When did they stop regular passenger runs, do you know?
oh, I don't know. Because it was freight all the time until the war came up, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. Mom remembers riding a train into Bellingham.
Oh, yeah.
But
That's how my
I think
grandparents
when they
did.
got the roads established in the 30s, when they started paving the
Yeah.
roads, then they started
Yeah.
to do away with the passenger train.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
But they had stations all along where I think Spencer was telling about the station at the Central, wasn't it?
Yeah, they had sidings because they didn't have all the for loading and unloading
Yeah.
freight and hauling stuff. My mother's piano came up from Seattle
Yeah.
and was unloaded at the one Horse Central. That was halfway between Bellingham and Sumas, so they called that Central.
Yeah,
That's where the Central Road got its name. And I was born on the Central Road.
Yeah.
Grew up on the Central Road.
still breathing on, close to it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on the property I was born on.
Yeah,
The other railroad crossing that he was talking about a mile south of Rotor, I think that went over to the Forest Grove Mill, didn't it?
I'm not
It's
sure.
shown on the earlier maps.
Okay,
So it
could
runs
be.
over to the Forest Grove Mill, which was just north of the Forest Grove School.
Okay.
But most people don't even know that Forest Grove ever existed.
yeah,
No, not just us old timers.
yeah.
People like to tell stories.
Well, there was a sawmill on the Central Road right at the foot of where the rock quarry is now. Oh shoot, why can't I think of the name? Senior moment here. But there was and I remember seeing that. It wasn't operating. I used to walk by it going to Forest Grove School.
Oh.
And, but the stack of the boiler was still sitting there. And, oh, Walker, Jimmy Walker's dad
Oh,
had that sawmill
Yeah.
there. And they're, they had them around different places because they didn't have the trucks to haul logs. They would yard them in there
yeah.
on skid roads and stuff.
You mentioned,
They took the mill to the woods. They didn't take
Yeah,
the woods
yeah,
to the
They
mill.
did.
yeah,
They'd take a mill in and then they'd log a section, and
Yeah.
when that's that section logged,
Then
they'd
they'd
take
move
the
it.
mill down and move it someplace else.
Just like Paul Bunyan's.
It's so efficient.
Where's the quarry on Central Road?
Did we have a question back there?
Just west
Just
of
west.
the Everson Goshen Road.
You got a question back
There's a
there?
rock quarry there.
Really?
Yeah. Used to be a switchback.
I'm rather deaf, so I have to read your lips if you have a question.
Oh, what I wanted to know was, as a nurse, I was helping out for a little bit in the Caldwell, Idaho, their museum. And they had a doctor there in town way back when, who used to actually even do some minor surgeries. I found it fascinating. And I was just wondering, in this area where you would seem to have, I mean, high-risk jobs and you're kind of out, did you mentioned an eye doctor, did you have a medical doctor or did you have someone in your town when you moved here?
There
Dr.
was,
Green.
A
Yep.
doctor?
there was a doctor, I can't remember, I think it was Dr. Beebe was here first, and then Dr. Green moved in.
Yep.
Okay.
Inslee Blair Green.
Yeah, and I remember him, that he'd been there forever, it seemed like.
Yeah.
He had a nurse named Miss Spunk,
Yep.
and
Geez.
so, my sister was born in, they called it a cottage up in Sumas.
Sumas,
I
yeah.
forgot the name of the,
Cottage Hospital.
Merrill?
Maryland Cottage.
Maryland?
that's it.
Maryland Cottage,
Maryland.
yeah.
Maryland's Cottage.
Yeah, and so, I remembered that because I think I was 8 years old, maybe going on 9, when my sister was born. And, I had to ride up with Dad because we didn't have babysitters. And, so, that was my experience with that place. And that was Dr. Sarvis that was there on that
Yep.
one.
And Dr. Nugent.
And Dr. Green was up above Jimmy Walker's
Yeah.
store.
Yes.
Right.
That was another thing, that was,
Yeah.
as you come over the bridge, Divers had a house there with a water tower close to it.
Yep.
And then the next house was either Scott, and then the next house was Hart, which
Scott
owned
and
the
Hart.
store, Scott and Hart.
Yep.
And I don't know which one was which, but they tore down one of them, but the Divers and one of the Scott and Hart houses is still there.
Yep.
And then Carl Gritch owned the garage. That's the only one that I knew about at that time. And then they had a lumberyard. Can't remember the name of it. It was
Copeland?
Copeland bought it later.
The
Columbia
Valley.
Valley.
Columbia Valley,
Valley.
that's
Yeah.
what it was, yeah. And then across the street was Scott and Hart. Well, Chelsea
Paulson's
Hale
bought
had a,
that.
what's that?
Paulson's had that, didn't they?
Hilda ShopRite
Well,
Oh,
Hilda's-
Hilda's where the
And then
farm
also
store
it was
is.
down in the basement, in the back.
The one that I'm thinking of is where the implement company is now.
Yes.
That was Hilda.
That was Scott and Hart's. And then when Scott and Hart, and then
Post office was in there.
Weda bought them out. And we could take eggs in and butter and trade it for whatever we needed. And, but I forgot, Garrett Weda, he had that for a while. And then Hilda got it. And then Garrett Weda moved down to where Napa is, and he had that store in there for a while. And then, I don't know if he folded up or retired or whatever, but it went out of business. And, but then, as you're coming down, there was a condensery there. First there was a railroad depot, and then the condensery. And there was a little spur came in there for loading railroad cars with whatever.
Yep.
And there was a little building, wedge-shaped building between the railroad tracks and the spur. And then you came down with Jimmy Walker's store, and where that street is now.
Yeah, and then Dr. Green was
And,
upstairs.
Yep.
yeah, Dr. Green was up above that store,
And then High Notes.
and then High Notes through the other side of the alley. And then you went down a little ways, and there was a eye doctor shop where the apartment house is. And then Charlie Grill had the hotel. And
Grell's Opera House.
yeah, they owned, that was a little further down.
Yeah.
They owned the hotel, and then they had just a house there, a duplex type. And my grandmother lived in one half, and I don't know who lived in the other. But then there was the Grill Opera House, and they had a bowling alley up above it. And they wasn't supposed to have a bowling going on when the movie, silent movies, you know. And some kids got up there and would roll the bowling balls. So that was when my dad was there. He was selling about it. But later on, there became a theater.
Yeah.
And Percy Berg, his wife, he called her Honey, and the boys, two boys, they called her Honey also. And they went out to get some popcorn or something, and they come back in and they couldn't find her. So she says, "Honey, where are you?" So
They ever find
everybody got a chuckle out of that.
Did they find her?
Oh yeah.
Where
Now
was
he's
she?
telling stories on my family.
Can we get together?
I haven't heard that story before.
But
Good time.
you did know about Honey though, didn't you?
I knew about Honey, but I didn't
Yeah.
know about them yelling Honey in the theater. That's like shouting, yelling fire in a theater, you know?
But then you go down on the far corner there where the sandwich shop is now, and my grandfather run a livery stable there. And he, I don't know, I don't think he owned it, I think he just run it. And
Where Arden Farms was,
no, that's where the sandwich shop is now, you know.
a little further than the Arden.
No, this way.
I didn't know there's, is a sandwich shop on this side, by Mady's, where Mady's was?
Yeah, it's,
In the old Mady's.
Subway, isn't it?
Subway.
Yeah. And,
Well, I don't know these new things, you know.
oh,
Anything in the last
You're gonna
20
have to
years, I
keep
don't
up
know, you know. Before that, I know a lot more about that.
oh, but then Arden Farms came in.
Shear had a livery stable in there earlier. So
Is that what-
Sturgeon must have taken over
Probably was.
from them.
Well, I think he was just a manager there,
Oh,
and stuff like that. But then Arden Farm came in. I don't remember what was there before Arden's put in their dairy thing there, but they made powdered milk at the Arden place, and kids would go watch the thing going across the big heated drum to dry out the milk and stuff. And our neighbor, he worked there, and all the milk that was ruined, he would bring to us, and we'd feed it to our pigs. And all those pigs loved it.
Oh, yeah.
I bet there were lots of Halloween tricks and jokes. and-
Oh, we had great fun at Halloween.
Yeah.
We'd go around trick or treating, and Richard Dieter and Bernard and I don't remember the judge's name, but there used to be a judge over across from the school, and so we would go over and holler trick or treat or something, but he didn't like to participate, so we would soap his windows and stuff. And then Richard stayed a little bit long, and so we hollered, "Richard, come on, let's go!" He said, "Don't use my name." So, but there was never any harmful stuff done that I ever heard about. But
Sometimes it got dirty, I guess.
oh, some things, yeah. There, Mrs. Panzerinsky there in Strandell, everybody had outhouses, and they would move her outhouse back. And,
My dad tells a story about that where they got pushed into the pot,
Mhm.
you know, and just had to climb out the best they could.
yeah.
But the guy said that was the worst I'd ever heard.
Oh, when I went to Rotor School, they had a outhouse, probably 12 feet, maybe 14 feet wide, and it was cut in half with a partition in the middle, and the girls had seats in their side. The boys, they had a log. And boy, it was spooky, looking down that hole, having to sit on the edge of that log. And, so,
Pretty bad. Most kids, little kids, I think they're gonna be gobbled up
yeah,
anyway.
yeah. I was
How
spooked
far
at
from
that
the
place.
school did they hide it?
I didn't hear you.
How far from the school did they keep it?
Oh,
Away
it
from the
was,
school?
I would say 25, 30 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, well, on the Rotor School, the Van Dyke Road goes on one side, and it was right up against the Van Dyke Road. And you can see where the auction barn is now, and between the auction barn and the Van Dyke Road is not very much space.
No.
Well, Carl Gritch, you have much history on Carl Gritch.
I just know who he was. He had a son named Todd,
Yes.
that he was pretty famous for hot rodding.
Well, do you know where Carl was from?
No.
I think it was from Russia.
Oh,
And he went through a lot of turmoil when it came to being under the communist.
yeah.
And so he left the country and came here
I see.
so he could live normal.
Yeah. Yeah, then, the bank building down here where the restaurant is,
Yeah.
or was,
Yeah.
they had a drugstore just on the other side of it. And I
Yep.
believe it was Edler's
Edler Brothers.
Brothers Drugstore.
Yep.
They had a soda fountain in there.
Yep.
And a comic book rack on the side. I guess they sell magazines and other stuff too, but the soda fountain was one of my favorite spots. But that brings up another subject. I was 3 years old, and Jess Cale had a prune orchard over here where all these freight boxes are stacked up, storage bins,
Storage, self-storage.
yeah, all that stuff over there. He had a house there and a barn, but he had, I think, 12 acres of prunes. And my dad and mom would pick up prunes, and they got a nickel a box. That was my first nickel when I was 3 years old. And boy, oh boy, they paid off every day. And I got my nickel, and I wanted to go to Everson. No, you gotta wait till tomorrow. And I couldn't hardly wait to get to the store to get that Hershey bar. So, Strandell had a store, but they didn't have the Hershey bar like the big one for 5 cents. So that was my big, and I've been money hungry ever since.
Sound like my oldest son. He got money, he had to spend it.
Yeah.
You remember Tony Washing?
Oh, that was a fun place. He had his door open and we could stand there and watch him make horseshoes.
He was a
and-
blacksmith.
Yeah,
His house is still there.
yeah.
The blacksmith shop's gone,
They got
but
a
the house is
parking lot
still
where
there.
the shops, the blacksmith shop used to be.
Yeah.
And, oh, another story about that. My Uncle Wilford was telling me that there was a guy in Everson that would come in and he'd sit down on the bench in that shop and get in the way. Everybody had to work around him and all the stuff. And so they got one of these old-fashioned telephones and they wired up the bench. And the guy plunked himself down there and was sitting there, and the guy went over and he cranked that thing, and the guy just rolled around, and he sat there for a while. He didn't say much, and pretty soon the guy went back and he cranked it again, and he jumped around. And he said, "Fellas," he said, "I got to go home." He said, "I just had a stroke." That was some of the fun things going on. But,
The good old days
yeah,
that you managed to live through.
another one of the deals, the Dieter boys and I, we went up to South Pass Road to Sar Creek. That's quite a jaunt, you know, for a 13-year-old kid, or 12-year-old, however we was. We camped out overnight up there on Sar Creek. And you go around the curve where the bridge is. We went just on the other side of the bridge and was camped out there. And we found an old car door. And we took that car door and put it over our bonfire, and then we put our toast on it. And the lead paint off of that old car door just about done me in. I got sicker than a dog. And we rode our bicycles up there, and my bicycle, all it was wheels with the handlebars and a seat. And Bernard's was about the same way, but Richard had a brand new bike with horn and a headlight, and it had a coil spring on the front, you know, shock absorber. And we were coming back, and he had a speedometer too, so we wanted to see how fast we could go coming down the hills and stuff. And the last big curve coming down the hill before you come on the straightaway toward Nooksack, we was coming down that at about 38 miles an hour.
Oh my
And the gravel road, see, and he was looking at the speedometer and he hit that little ridge of gravel where the road grader did it,
Yep.
and he went end over end on that deal. Scratched up his bike pretty bad, but
It was okay.
he's survived. Those days, it'd take a bullet to kill you.
Yeah.
Now, Les, you mentioned before it started about a CC camp and what the road was like, the South
Yeah,
Pass.
the old South Pass was a logging road when I was a little guy, a logging road with turnouts. And some of the turnouts are still there if you look for them. But that was the road that they had a dance hall up where the Kendall Road crosses the South Pass. And in that far corner was a big old dance hall there. Or was a barn, but they used it for a dance hall. And my dad, he drank, and he had a pint fruit jar full of homemade juice. And so I was 3 years old, and he set me on the bench there, and he said, "Now, I'm putting this jar down here," and he said, "If anybody tries to get it, you holler like everything." So I was a shotgun guard over a jar of whiskey at 3 years old. And, nobody got it, but Dad drank that before he went home. And then he woke up the next morning and he couldn't remember coming home. He said, "How'd I get home?" And Mom said, "You drove home." And it scared him so bad he never drank again. And so he got the cure the easy way, I guess you'd say. All the stories that came out. There was one fellow that was noted for telling long tales and stuff. And the old Model Ts, you know, he had 3 pedals on the floor. One for going forward, and one for brake, and one for reverse. And he said that his car got stuck in reverse, And so he jumped straddle of the steering post and drove the thing backwards.
Oh my God. Well, I should have gotten a medal for that.
And nobody around to take pictures of it.
No,
No.
oh, I tell you. People did a lot of fun things. No harm intended for any of it, you know, but
Yeah.
now it's a different world we're living in.
Yeah.
And they live in it with this element of danger all the time. The kids never
Yeah.
get away from it.
Yeah,
To imagine a nice big fat fight where nobody gets hurt really, that's
Oh.
the funnest thing in the world, you know.
Yeah.
Especially boys.
we used to go to the dances at Saturday night to watch the fights. I didn't know how to dance, and people I went with didn't know how to dance. We just went to see the fights. And this one fellow was noted for his heavy drinking. I ain't gonna mention his name, but he was really, really soused. He was standing there, and this guy got mad at him, and he hit him in the stomach really hard, and he sprayed him down.
Oh my gosh.
So that was the end of that fight. But it was just a grand time to be growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got to see all of the old stuff, you know, from the horse and buggy. There
Yes.
used to be people go to town in the wagon pulled with a horse.
Yeah.
Right by our house. And Mr. Crawford lived up on the hill on the Mission Road there. And he was building a barn, and he hit the nail, and it flipped up and poked his eye out, and he stopped right there. And he never did another thing, but he would take his horse and wagon to town to get whatever he needed and back up again, and that was it.
Do you remember a guy by the name of Jess? Lived down somewhere where you live. And he had a car, and he drove fast. He would come up, and then he'd come up the Central Road. And he drove, it was days when there were very few cars.
Yeah, I heard the name, but I don't think I knew him.
Okay, I didn't know him, but I know the name. My folks knew him, I
Yeah.
think. But, yeah,
Uh,
he was a fast driver.
Yeah, that, the roads were pitiful. Used to be a guy, Eckler was his last name. They called him Mud Eckler. I don't know what his real name was, but he didn't know any speed other than fast. And coming down the road on that hill and on the Mission Road there was all washboard. And you could just see where he had hit the top of the washboard.
Where did he live?
He lived over on the Hemi Road.
Oh, Con Eckler.
Con Eckler's son.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I knew Con.
Yeah. Oh, Con was a man with new horses, and he logged with horses, and he had an A-frame. They'd bring the truck in, and he would tell that horse, "Okay, babe." She'd pull the log up, and the truck would pull under there, and he'd say, "Okay, back, babe." She'd lower the log down. He'd unhook it, go hook on another one, and just that's all he did. Didn't even have to worry about the bridle or nothing. Just talk to it. So, but he was quite a horseman.
Do you remember Felix Winsky?
Oh yeah,
Oh, that name's familiar
Yeah.
from somewhere. Yeah.
Felix was quite the guy. When VJ came, he went by our place, a gravel road yet, and he had a Model A with a bed spring tied on it, and the sparks were just flying all over the world. And he was honking the horn and flying down the road. But poor old Felix, he got killed in the tractor and wagon. He had a wagon load of something, and the tractor jackknifed and killed him. That was a
Well, he
sad
was going down a
story.
hill, I heard, and the
Yeah.
load slid forward and caught him.
Yeah,
But he used to come back on the Van Buren Road, and we'd hear that old tractor coming. And it was kind of a dirty black looking thing or whatever. And it was this tall, skinny guy
yeah,
standing on that thing. And we'd wave at you, and we'd just stand there and just wait for him every day.
yeah. His brother, Tony, he bought a tavern over at Custer. And he run that till he died, I guess. He bought a car from my dad, a 37 Nash Lafayette. And he kept that car going for, probably 25 years. And this lasted and lasted and lasted.
What was your first car?
Model T, 1927. My dad bought it, and it was too open for him. It was an old touring that they'd made into a pickup. And they put a tin roof over the top and everything, and that was a good experience too. You had to lift up the hind wheel and put a block of wood under the axle, and then go around and crank it in the front. And when it started, the bands would make the wheel go around, see? And when the bands got warmed up, the wheel would stop turning. You shove it off at the block and go whatever you're going to do with it. And but that was my mechanical stuff. I had to replace the bands in it once, so I got to experience that. And now, when it comes to fooling with a car, I have to take it to a shop.
Yeah, I don't touch them anymore.
No.
Except my old 73 F-250. I can stand on the ground next to the engine and work on it. Yeah.
Oh, that Model T I had didn't have floorboards in it. It was made out of shiplap, you know. And they brought it out eventually, and I could look at the road going by really fast. That was kind of interesting. And then Ted Miracle, he had a Model T, but it jackknifed enormously. Well, it broke the steering wheel off, and so he got a pair of long, about 10-inch vice grips, and he put them on. And he was steering it, and when that jackknife would almost break your arm. And we'd go down to Klein's with our Model Ts. Mick Solinger had a Chevy truck, and we'd all go down there behind Klein's, and there was a lot of gullies in the land behind Klein's place, and we would run those. And when you're running in a Model T, you're up pretty high anyway, and that Model T's going up the hill, and you feel like, boy, oh boy, I want to go back down again. And then when we would go up and try to roll back down. So, and when we did that, well, when you get sideways up on that hill, you're wondering if you're going to get back down again. So that was another fun trip.
Is that the Klein that worked at the Bacher Mercantile?
That's the one. Yeah.
Benny Klein.
Yeah, it was his dad's place.
Yeah.
Back there where we went and run the truck.
Yep.
But Benny has always been a good friend of the family, and his dad was Tommy Klein, and he was here before there was any roads, and he was telling me about when he was he called himself a little Indian, and he said, when I was a little Indian, we had to walk to Chilliwack, and then Sumas had a lake up here, you know.
Yep.
Wasn't very deep, but it was really a mosquito factory. And so he said that the mosquitoes was so bad you had to wear a cloth over your face to keep the mosquitoes from going up your nose and everything.
Oh, I've heard that.
Now, Les, about the Sullingers. Of course, I mentioned to you the other day because I'm doing some work on that family.
Yeah.
What can you, so it can be recorded, can you mention something about the family?
Yeah, the Sullinger, Joe Sullinger was
Joseph was his
Joseph
name,
was
yes. Joseph and
the
Stella.
original Sullinger. And then when he passed away, his two boys, Edgar and Ebby, divided the property in half, and Ebby lost his, but Edgar kept his forever, and then his sons inherited that, and it was Mick, and Mick was a year older than me, I think, and then Delbert and Jim, and there was 3 daughters too, Betty and Phyllis. The other daughter, I can't remember her
There
name.
was a Daisy.
Was there a Daisy? And, but Phyllis, she married Bill Stevens, and they lived on the property where I live now. And then Betty, she married a fellow named Cooper, and they moved down on the corner of the Pole Road and the Mission Road in a little shack there. And he got mad at her one day and beat her up pretty good. So the Solinger boys went down and they adjusted his face for him. And said if it ever happens again, we will finish you off and throw you in the river. Well, he got the message and he left, never seen again.
Oh, man.
So don't pay to beat up on people in those days.
No.
Not in the Everson area.
Yeah. But,
I think Mick was a classmate of mine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he was an elderly.
Lawrence was his name.
Yeah, he was an elderly gentleman like yourself.
Yes. Would be now.
Yeah. Yeah, he passed away, I understand.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But he was a janitor at the Kendall School, I believe, or custodian, I guess they call him now. But, there's just no end to the good things that had happened. The,
Just north of,
the Bissett Farm,
Just south of-
back there, can't remember, Emerson Road. That was a interesting place. He was a Scotchman, and he had a pretty good Scotch accent, and I like to copy accents, so we got along fine. But David and I went to school with David. We were in the same grade, and then Douglas, he came along later, and now Betsy, she still keeps in touch with me. And so that was a fun deal too.
What would happen there? What would happen there? That
Oh, the floods came. The river would flood, and it wasn't really deep, maybe a foot or two, but they had to go in and out by boat. And people say that Everson didn't have any floods for 100 years now. Well, I can remember 2 of them where water was going across the street down here in
Yep.
Main Street.
yeah.
Yeah, that's only been
So
20
that's-
years. They've had,
Yeah,
90 was, water was running a couple feet
Yeah.
deep through the river.
and out where the Mormon church is out there, now that field, I can remember that whole field was river. In fact, I believe it was in '52, the Nooksack River was 13 miles wide
Oh, my
Wow.
Lord.
from that flood.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there was a piece of Stickney Island Road laying out in the guy's field. The whole thing just floated out there.
I remember hearing about that, yeah.
Didn't grow a good crop of hay.
I got a picture of that one.
Yeah, blacktop never
Yeah,
sprouted
they
either.
lifted the blacktop up
Yeah.
and moved it
Yeah.
out into the field.
Well, everything from on the north side of the Nooksack, within, what, 200 or 300 feet, all goes to the Fraser.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
all Fraser watershed.
And they say it goes uphill.
Now, Sumas is quite a few feet lower than Everson.
Yeah, it makes sense because Everson's at 85 feet and Sumas is at 30.
Yeah,
Oh,
Whoa.
yeah.
There's a 55-foot drop. You don't know when you're driving, you think you're driving along nice level land. You're
Oh,
going down
no.
55
Yeah.
feet
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well,
between here and Sumas.
in Sumas.
So whenever it gets over the end of Johnson Creek, where's it going to go?
Sumas.
Sumas.
Well, in
find a
90,
tree and climb.
And if you look at the old soil maps, all of the valley between Nooksack and Sumas was laid down by a river sometime.
yeah.
So the Nooksack used to go north.
Used to go into the Fraser. Yeah.
Someplace 150, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
There must
But
have
it
been an
doesn't
ice jam
anymore.
on the Nooksack that forced it over and went west. Because the river, the soils change as soon as you get west of Everson.
Well, is it improving or
What?
is it improving or is it,
It just
situation-
changes. That's why the old timers say, well, we need to let the river do exactly what it's always done. Well, if we did that, there would be no Everson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, they don't think about that.
They
neither do
almost
I.
let it take out the treatment plant in '90.
Oh, they could take that out.
Hmm?
They could take that out and it would please me.
If they took that out, there'd be no sewer in Everson or
Oh, no,
Nooksack.
take it back.
Well, that in
But that
'90,
is- hmm?
in '90, that flood that hit Sumas from here came and blew out the train tracks.
Yes.
yeah.
And
And the Canadians said, if you guys can't handle it down there, we'll build a dike right on the border and you can keep it on your side.
well, the Sumas Lake came back basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It took out the Trans-Canada Highway, it took out the Trans-Canada Railroad. There was absolutely no way for anything from Vancouver to get east,
Wow.
except by air.
Now they got a pumping station up there.
Well, they had a
Better
pumping
river.
station then, but the water blew out the pumps.
Oh, okay, okay.
They blew out the pumps and said, if you don't pump,
that's where the
you
Bitter
pump
River
3
comes
months of
in,
the
I
year.
think.
Yeah,
Because normally the Fraser's low enough that the water will run out.
yeah.
But when the water gets high in the Fraser, it comes back this way into what was Chilliwack, or
Yeah.
Lake Sumas.
Well, Westergreens had done some logging, and we're up on the hill where I live, where I don't live, but where I own land. And I took some pictures of that flood, looking down on Sumas, telephoto. And it wasn't very clear, but it was clear enough to, I knew what was going on. And there were some farms there where the buildings, the barns, were a little bit higher than the water, and the cows were all congregated around the barns, trying to stay out of the water.
Yeah, when I was up there, I said, why don't you guys go put stakes at the edge of the water? Then you'll know where the 100-year floodplain is.
Yeah,
You don't have to rely on FEMA and their maps.
when I went to get a building permit, the lady at the deal, she said, oh, you're fortunate, you're not in the floodplain. I said, no, there's no floodplain there where I live, I'm 700 feet up. And she said, well, across the road is a floodplain. I said, you gotta be kidding. He's the same level as I am, you gotta go back a half a mile before it drops down to the river deal. But they put it out, and Jordan Silvis was putting in a cul-de-sac there, and they made him put in a pit 12 feet long and 8 feet wide and 8 feet deep on both sides of the road, and put a culvert through so that when the water got there, it could balance out on the deal. And it cost him $4,000 extra
Wow.
besides his permits
Does it work?
to do that. Never had a drop of water in it because there's no flood there. It just is-
How could he lose?
it's a stupidity that we have in our system that overwhelming sometimes. Instead of going out and looking to see if it's a floodplain, somebody just said, nope, that's floodplain.
Well, I got,
Protocol.
You
I got
ask the
two
old
neighbors
timers. You wanna know where the
that when-
floodplain is? Ask the old timers, they know.
Right
two
there?
neighbors that when they put in driveways and Bob Macbeth put in a development, he had to put in fish culverts.
Yeah,
The only way fish is gonna get in there is if it walks underground, swims overland, or somebody carries it, because there's no connection with the river. All that water goes up and then goes straight down up where the gravel pits are. Same as Fazan Lake.
yeah. And down here, just after you cross the bridge, go around the corner, they build a bunch of houses down in there.
Yeah.
And my neighbor was gonna build a house down there. And I says, I wouldn't build down there because that's a floodplain. He said, no, I said, they haven't had a flood there for 100 years. I said, well, I've been there twice, and I know that there's been floods over the road there even. And he checked it out, and they required that you build another foot on top of your footing so that you're above the water level. And then he got the deal and he backed out. But so real estate people, they want to sell land. They don't care how they have to do it. But,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. If we want to build a house anywhere, it should be our responsibility to build it and do it properly. If we want to get it flooded out, that's our business.
Yeah.
But like I got a piece of property up on off of the South Pass Road, and I want to build on there, but it's 600 feet off of the South Pass, and I can't build anything there because I can't get turnouts on the other people's property. They gotta be 30 feet wide and 60 feet long, so for turnouts every 600 feet. And you can't go on other people's property and do that kind of stuff, so now I can't build up there on that.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to do what we have to do.
We just sit and watch it.
Anybody else have any more questions? Questions?
When you were young, did you ever walk up into Canada?
Rode a bicycle up there once, but my mom, she walked up there all the time. They had friends in Abbotsford, and she'd walk across and just wave at the guy at the station, border station.
Yeah.
This young lady is my granddaughter,
Oh,
Rebecca.
oh, okay.
And did you know somebody that owned a bobcat, like a wildcat?
No, it was a bear.
Okay.
No, I got a picture over here of my uncle shot a bobcat, and I'm hugging it on the fender of his car. But Oliver Dieter shot a mother bear and had the little cub, and they had the little cub with a collar and a chain on it, and prune season came along, and we'd put prunes in our pocket. The little guy would think, hey, prunes, you know, and he would reach in your pocket and pull out prunes, but he couldn't tell when there wasn't any left. And he would tear the pocket off. And so they got the idea they maybe better get rid of the bear. So I don't know what they did with it, but it was gone. But we had a lot of experiences with things like that.
I heard there was a guy who knows quite a bit about the local trains around here,
Mhm.
and I thought the name was Sturgeon, lives out there on the Mission Road, or lived on the Mission
Yeah,
Road.
he passed away. That was Wilford. Yeah, he worked for the railroad for years at various things.
Whatever happened to all his pictures and stuff?
His son got them, and his son lives in Vancouver, Washington, and I tried to get his other sons to get the copies of the pictures, and he doesn't want to share them. So
Yes.
it's sad, but that's the way it is. Wilford has some super pictures of it. Some of the pictures he had had stumps in the street in Everson yet that they hadn't
Oh my
got
God.
dug out, and
Really?
the likes of that.
Wow.
And
That's
he had
amazing.
pictures of the blacksmith shop in Everson, and the big crew they had working in the place, and all kinds of pictures like that, but they're gone now, and Ronnie is the guy that has them, but he doesn't share them. He told his brothers that if you want one, just tell me what one you want. Well, you got a suitcase full of pictures, you can't say, well, I want the third one down or something.
Wow.
And he doesn't have anything to do with his other brothers.
Any more questions?
Oh, another thing, little story, and I believe it's true. But you know where the florist shop is now down here? Oh, that used to be a tavern and a restaurant and a few other things. And Jimmy Walker was in there, and they just invented root beer. And my dad was with him. And Jimmy said, well, I think I could drink a gallon of that stuff. It's so good. So they bet him $1. And they would buy the root beer if he could drink it all, of the whole gallon. And Dad said he drank and he drank and he drank. And he said pretty soon he belched and foam would run out of his nose. So he didn't get the whole gallon.
Who was the barber in the corner of that town?
Howard Olin.
Howard Olin.
Yeah.
That's right.
And they said he could cut hair better drunk than the average barber could
Yeah.
sober.
He,
Yeah,
he was a good barber.
he gave me my first professional haircut.
Mine too.
My mother did them all
Yeah.
up until I was a senior in high school. My wife does it now.
Yeah. There's
His
another
house-
story about that old tavern there. There was a guy, thought he was a boxer, and he bought a pair of boxing gloves, you know, and he was jumping around there wanting to get some of the guys to fight with him, you know, box with me. And Harry Iverson, he came in, and Dad said that Harry didn't want to box. the guy said, "Come on, you don't need to be afraid. I won't hurt you." And finally conned Harry into putting them on. And in the back corner there, they had a toilet with this wainscoting partition, so conceal it from the rest of the place. And the guys started jumping around, and Harry hit it one time, knocked him right through the wall into the toilet. End of the fight.
Howard's house was the first house past the west of the implement company, where the
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there was a post office in there, and there's still a emblem on the floor in that building there.
Oh, there is?
Yes.
Yeah. Where the flower shop is now, Jens Bacher had a
Yep.
store right next to it, and he had general merchandise, I think. He had
Yeah.
groceries and clothes and
Yeah.
shoes and.
Same as Jimmy Walker, like,
Yeah.
and Scott and Hart.
Yeah.
There was 3 of those.
And when I first got married, I went to Bacher's store, and he had a Homburg hat in there. And I think it was like $16 or something. And I used him down to 12. And my wife was so embarrassed. And then he had a fishing rod. And so he wanted, I don't remember the price now, but I had him knock off a few bucks. My wife was embarrassed again, so she didn't want to go shopping with me.
Scott and Hart also had a feed mill,
Yeah,
right
Yeah.
next to it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and, but the old things that I liked about it was where you could take your produce or whatever. You had squash left over, take it down, and they'd sell it at the store. They wouldn't give you much for it, you'd get something.
Yeah.
And you could trade it for a bottle of vanilla or whatever you might need.
Bartering.
Butter or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Jim has a neighbor in town who used to work at that store as a young lady, about 16 years old. She was a Starkenberg. And just the idea that she knows you, and
Who was that? What was the name?
I can't remember her name,
Ah.
but her last name was Starkenberg. And what's her name in Linden? She was the bicycle shop, Brink, Lena Brink's sister. Pete Starkenberg's sister, and Reen, and all those Starkenbergs. She's close to your neighborhood where you live. And anyway, but she used to work there when she was 16. That was her first job. And she ended up becoming the bookkeeper.
yeah. My cousin Lois worked at Scott and Hart when she was a teenager. Lois Sturgeon. And she, I think she got married while she was still working there to a boy who lived up on the South Pass. He went in the Navy. Oh, can't pull his name up. And that's from eating too much bacon I've been telling you about. Your mind gets slippery.
Oh, I like that.
Well, I better quit on that one. Huh?
Okay.
Thank you all.
Coming.